21 young people are suing the U.S. government for continuing to push fossil fuels, knowingly harming them, the plaintiffs. When their trial, Juliana versus the U.S., came to the Supreme Court, Harford County Climate Action held a rally in support. Activists from Howard County Climate Action, as well as from Baltimore and beyond, joined in solidarity.
I am with Harford County Climate Action, and I want to thank you all so much for coming out today. How many people here are from Harford County? Raise your hands. Yay, Harford County, all right. Good job, all right. Thank you for coming. And I know that we have some people here from other places as well. So if you are from Howard County, please raise your hand. All right. Thank you so much. There are people who are here with us today from India.
Yeah.
And if you are from India, please raise your hands. All right, thank you so much. It's great to have you here with us. And if there's anyone who's here from any other place, would you like to speak up, or have we covered it all? Baltimore County!
Hey.
All right, all right, so earlier this month, the International Panel on Climate Change published a summary of the most current science about climate change. The IPCC concluded that we have only a dozen years to halt the most devastating impacts of climate change. 3 years ago, Juliana and 20 other youths filed suit against the United States for actively and knowingly contributing to climate change, thereby violating their constitutional right to a climate system that is capable of sustaining life, liberty, and property. The youth are demanding a science-based National Climate Recovery Plan, which is exactly what the IPCC wants from every country. And it's exactly what we want too. We want a climate recovery plan from Harford County, from the town of Bel Air. We want a carbon recovery plan from each of you and from every elected official. We are here today because after 3 years of stalling, the trial of the century was slated to begin tomorrow. A week ago, the Trump administration took the unusual step of asking the Supreme Court and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to stop the trial via writ of mandamus. This is a rarely used and even more rarely granted appeal in which a higher court overrules a lower court before a verdict has been issued. The Ninth Circuit has twice turned down the request for mandamus, and the Supreme Court turned down the previous request as well. Nevertheless, a stay has been granted.
Boo!
Of course.
And the youths were asked to respond. They turned in their response this past Monday. Julia Olson, co-counsel, stated, "We are confident that once Chief Justice Roberts and the full Supreme Court reviews the youth plaintiff response to the defendant's mischaracterization of their case, the trial will proceed."
Yay!
Bear in mind that this case has survived numerous attempts over the years by the government to dismiss it since it was originally filed in 2015. Please keep your eye on the Harford County Climate Action Facebook page and website, where we will update you about when the trial will begin. Also, today, when you get home, download the podcast, No Ordinary Lawsuit. Go Pam, there it is. No Ordinary Lawsuit. and get ready to listen to it daily when the trial begins. You will hear testimony from the world's experts on climate science. And now, we have the privilege of hearing from the people we really should and need to be listening to, our own youth. Or not. Is a 9th grade student of Aberdeen High School's Science and Math Academy.
I'm here to speak about the environment. I'm a procrastinator. In fact, I actually wrote this speech like 3 hours ago. But you may ask, what does this have to do with the environment? Well, I believe the U.S. government is a lot like me. Like, they're gonna procrastinate saving the environment till we're already in trouble. The reason I believe we'll be in trouble is because we're constantly using up our resources and we're gonna run out. Like, we learned this in AP Environment. Oh yeah, we learned this in AP Environmental class. So I believe we're gonna run out of resources. So especially our country, because we have a high affluence, and an affluence is a country's wealthiness. While I was writing this, I was actually watching the Lorax. So
For you.
Yeah, so in the Lorax, I believe Dr. Seuss was foreshadowing what's gonna happen to us, and it shows like when we run out of materials, how we're like people are gonna sell us those materials, and those are gonna be like valuable things. So this was one quote that Dr. Seuss said: "Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's gonna get better. It's not." This quote is like what we must look at as like a symbol for what's gonna happen. Unless we will change, like nothing's gonna happen. We're just gonna run out.
Kalala Mari is a 10th grade student in the Science and Math Academy of Aberdeen High School also. And Kiali is also a long-term member of Harford County Climate Action and a great youth activist.
Hello everyone, as Ms. Tracy said, I'm Kiali. On October 7th, the New York Times published the following article. Major climate report describes a strong risk of crisis as early as 2040. The article stated that the report, released by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, describes a world of worsening food shortages and wildfires and a mass die-off of coral reefs as soon as 2040. I am 15 now. I will graduate from high school in 2021 and finish grad school around 2031. That leaves me about 9 years before the major effects of climate change kick in. I'll be 37. There are many things I want to be doing at 37. I could be a civil rights activist. I could be a librarian, which, if you think about it, is the same thing. I could be writing the next great fantasy series. I could answer the P versus NP question, which is a problem in computability. I could solve Goldbach's conjecture, which is about prime numbers. I could be on Broadway. Someone from Bel Air High School could be developing a life-saving technique in medicine, like a vaccine for malaria. Someone from Aberdeen Middle could be inventing the next Minecraft or an affordable solar car. Someone from Wakefield Elementary could make a revolutionary historical discovery. A homeschooler and a community sports team could break a record at the Olympics. Still more kids from all over this county could, in 20 or 30 years, be running for office, teaching in schools, raising children, working in grocery stores, manufacturing crayons, managing a household, making television shows, starting rock bands, or any number of other things. In short, we could all have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We won't be able to pursue our dreams if we have to spend all our time worrying about the world of worsening food shortages, storm surges, and wildfires. We have enough of these problems already. Does the government have the right to deprive us of our futures to fulfill the short-term greed of today? 2040 is not very far away. Where is the urgency? Young people have filed a lawsuit against the U.S. government demanding the right to a climate system capable of sustaining human life. The lawyer arguing for the government called their demand meritless and said that the plaintiffs had no standing. The trial was supposed to start tomorrow, but the Supreme Court has granted a temporary stay while it considers the Trump administration's petition to dismiss the case.
Boo!
Why is it being stayed and delayed? We don't have time for for this. We will not be dismissed.
We don't have time.
We have had enough of people saying we have to protect the land and water for our children, and yet postponing any action. Your children are here to protect the land ourselves.
Sadly.
Woo!
We need heavy carbon taxes to deter the emission of greenhouse gases. We need to rely on renewable energy, not fossil fuels.
Yes.
We need to get off fossil fuels fast, as soon as humanly possible. We also need to reduce our overall use of energy. In order to do these things, we, the people, must elect representatives who will do their utmost to steer the U.S. and the world away from the climate crisis. Go to the polls and vote. I can't vote yet. Value your right to vote and use it. No excuses.
Yep.
Vote for
Yes.
Vote for candidates who take climate change seriously. And after you do more. Voting is very important, foundation of the democracy and all that, but it's also the bare minimum amount of civic responsibility. After you vote, call your new representatives. Write to them. Make sure they protect this planet and all of our lives.
All right, we have one more youth speaker. We appreciate Iris, who has come here from Howard County.
If you are 35 or younger, you've never experienced normal climate. That is unprecedented. And every year we're alive, it's the hottest year on record. Yeah, that's also unprecedented. The fact that we'd rather be in court alongside these 21 plaintiffs suing our own government than accept our current world. Yeah, that too is unprecedented. I'm a 14-year-old freshman, and climate change is something that my fellow Generation Z teens and I have grown up with. Climate change is something that has been always looming out there, occasionally making an appearance in the conversation, but never really mentioned because we think of it as a faraway problem that is too political and taboo. We think of climate change as another depressing headline, always happening to someone else. But for the first time in our history, we have seen the clear evidence that our burning of fossil fuels has caught up to us, and that climate change is affecting us in our near future, if not already. Climate change is like a bomb threat that we want to ignore. The Juliana versus U.S. case has been ignored for 3 years, constantly delayed, just like the action on climate in this country. But the ignorance stops today. We cannot normalize this new kind of world. For the first time, we have seen a summer full of breaking records, from heat and drought to destructive wildfires never seem to stop, and the frequent flash flooding in our area threatening every Marylander. We have seen more catastrophic hurricanes like Harvey, Maria, Florence, and Michael, all of which have deeply affected my relatives. We have also seen, for the first time, 2 1,000-year floods in the span of 2 years here in our state. And we thought we could postpone acting on climate change until later. This huge elephant in the room must be talked about and acted upon because we are all being affected by climate change. My generation and those younger will have to live in a very different world when we are grown up. But it doesn't have to be this way. The very recent IPCC report that we have no choice but to stay under 1.5 degrees Celsius is a serious wake-up call to ambitious action that we should have taken years ago, meaning no more room for fossil fuels. We have less than 12 years to avert an irreversible crisis. This does not mean we procrastinate for a few years and then take some action. This means we need to create an aggressive, science-based climate recovery plan to make up for the decades of inaction. We can no longer think now or never. It's now and now.
Yes!
The U.S. federal government has violated our constitutional rights to life, liberty, and property by knowingly allowing fossil fuel corporations to continue to be subsidized. 70% of global emissions have come from 11 companies, and the U.S. accounts for 1/4 of all global emissions. The corporations responsible for this mess have known about this the whole time, and our government has the responsibility to protect us from polluters and make them pay. Our future is being robbed because of a problem we did not cause. We have known about climate change for way too long. Despite all this, politicians on both sides continue to allow fossil fuel corporations to fund their campaigns instead of putting us first. 25 years ago, we could be excused for not knowing much or doing much about climate change. But today, we have no more excuses. We cannot call America great if our government continually assaults our livelihoods and forgets our natural-born rights to a safe future. We cannot accept apocalypse. balance. We are the richest, most technologically advanced country in the world, which should mean that we are innovating and investing in the green economy. But we are not moving in the right direction, instead moving back to the Industrial Revolution. We cannot let billionaire corporations get away with our damage. And our young voices will never give up. The world is moving ahead with new actions every day, showing that it is possible to sustain our environment. How hard is it to secure the right to clean air and water? And why does that have to be controversial and partisan?
Yes.
But before we feel angry and depressed about committing global suicide, let's remember that we create political will. I know we will get to a sustainable economy that boosts our GDP, creates jobs, and saves lives. The citizens must elect leaders who will make climate a priority and initiate 100% renewable and carbon neutral policies and stop the subsidizing of fossil fuels by rejecting new infrastructure and making polluters pay. We know what we need, but our elected officials and candidates need to know that these solutions must be a priority and must come fast. I might not know much about how the government works, but the government works for us. Adults, please vote with your children and their well-being in mind. But most importantly, it's the youth's vote that will matter the most, because 4 million youth have turned 18 between 2016 and this midterm election, and we are the most progressive, educated, and diverse. Imagine if all of us voted and the change we would create. This is what democracy looks like. Climate change is no longer something we think about and occasionally forget. We must break the cycle of returning to business as usual, of merely talking to talk. I would like to see us start with our schools, because we students are the next generation. We need to learn not only to be good students, but to be unafraid to raise our voices. We are not only the future, but the now. We are the ones who will be most affected by climate change, so we must use our voices and our votes to carve the path to real justice. Maryland must no longer allow any new pipelines or any kind of fossil fuel infrastructure.
No new pipelines.
We need a 100% renewable bill by 2025. Generation Z will no longer hide in the shadows. Young people need to learn how to fight for our climate rights, just as we learn how to read and write. We'll show the older generations we have no choice but to act. We are not as apathetic or superficial as some might think. Climate change isn't just impacting an environment we feel is separate from us, because we are part of our environment. And climate change is also a health and education problem, an economic inequality problem, and a community, social justice, and global problem. We will win this fight for a livable future. We've got everything to lose if we don't act, but nothing to lose, and everything to gain if we do act. Because youth might be 25% of our world population, but we are 100% of our future.
Awesome, so much. This is not about partisan politics. This is about life, liberty, and the right to a future. What do we want?
Our shorelines!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Clean air!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Our history!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Biodiversity!
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Life.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Liberty.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Future.
When do we want it?
Now.